Hello again. Well, we've just heard it from the horse's mouth during the 2022 budget speech delivered a few moments ago. The Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, is saying that the fuel levy will not be going up, while the foster care and child support grants will increase by 20 Rand in April, and 44 billion Rand has now been allocated for a 12-month extension of the 350 Rand social relief grant. That's a social distress grant. Now, this comes amid continuous job cuts, the increased cost of living, fluctuating fuel prices, and the devastating impact COVID-19 has had over the past years. Chief Economist at Econometrics, Dr. Zahar Jameen, Oxfam South Africa Chairperson and Development Economist, Pheli Sankomo, and Khanti Pai, economist from Nison's Advisor and Research, joining us now just to give us a view of the budget speech. Can I begin with you, Azar? First, may I start with you first, Khanti Pai? Your overall reaction first up to the minister. I mean, the minister, from the reaction we're getting, is like he had a tough act to balance, but people are receiving it largely positively. Your sense?
No, I think the president did very well. I mean, sorry, the minister did quite well in the sense that a lot of the positive things that came out of the president's speech seem to have been funded well going into this speech. I mean, I think one of the interesting parts of this, because there's been so much concern around Eskom and its ability, to fund itself, and secondly, not to put as much pressure on the consumer, given the pressure that we're facing. It seems that he's putting, something that will allow a little bit of that pressure to be taken off the consumer.
Yeah, Khanti, just hold off there, and Azar Jameen, stand by, and Pheli Sankomo as well. We have to go back to Cape Town live. We have my colleague Devin Murugan. He's got the Minister of Finance himself just to give us his sense of his own budget after delivering it. Over to you, Devin.
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Braden. I do have the Finance Minister, Godongwana, with me after a budget that I would tell you some consumers would have liked a lot, but there's nitty-gritties in the budget that I'd like to speak to the Finance Minister about. Minister, thanks very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.
I noticed that, you made a point that this windfall that we had, 180 billion Rand, it opened the door for many things. I mean, you've mentioned good things to our ears as far as tax is concerned, but you put a warning. You put a warning that the super cycle that brought over this tax revenue from the mining companies won't last. So where do you get your future money from?
Let me say, it's not only the super cycle. Our estimation, you'll see, we've done a revised the growth trajectory upwards.
Yeah.
Which means the uptick of the economy is higher than we have thought. And that is, by the way, is reflected on this, even in this 180 billion, is not only from mining, it's from across the spectrum in the economy. So we are projecting a better revenue for the next fiscal year, which, if we continue spending in a prudent manner, there will be no requirement for increasing taxes.
Because ideally that's the point, isn't it, Minister? Because you're either going to get revenue from two sources, right? You're going to go ahead, get a good economy going, people are paying taxes, your revenue gets up, or if you want to see to your social obligations, you've got to borrow. Now, what's a bit frightening is if you look at the cost of borrowing at the moment, for South Africa, the interest rates are quite high, aren't they?
It's high because part of the difficulty, which people do not know, is given the fact that we're already in a junk state, the rate at which we borrow is high, right? So, and the economy is growing less than the rate at which we're borrowing. So we've got to be very prudent in the manner in which we spend money, and therefore we've got to be careful about borrowing more. Hence, we've got to find ways of utilizing what we have in an effective and an efficient way. That's the message we're trying to send across. And we're also saying, if that happens, we'll be able to continue to put money into your hands.
Yep. What happens in the case of state-owned enterprises? And I noticed you made a big point here. You know, when you spoke about Eskom, you said that government has to do, in your words, a little bit of magic on their debt, because if you do not sort out this utilities debt, it has economic ramifications. What sort of discussions are you having around this magic intervention to see to Eskom's
The first and foremost, I'm saying there are efficiency issues which we have raised with Eskom which need to be attended to. But Eskom must also sell assets, so that in selling those assets it can be able to service its debt, so that we become the last line rather than the first line. We become the last line in resolving Eskom's debt. So, but we've got to go through a restructuring process in which Eskom achieves efficiencies, sell assets. That's the process we've got to undergo. It's a tough one. It's not ideal for them, but it's ideal for the fiscus and the country.
You mentioned that you were sitting down with the Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, on a topic that much of our viewers were speaking about. And I think you put a smile on their faces by saying there will be no increase in the general fuel levy, there will be no increase in the road accident fund levy. But beyond that, you said the way this petrol price is calculated is not competitive. What type of discussions are you having?
Let me start with the basic fuel price,
yes,
what could be called BFP. There's scope to reduce that as well, before we can deal with the 40% which is administered prices. So basic fuel price on its own is higher than it should be. And secondly, we've loaded the petrol price with a lot of administered prices, whether as road agencies and everybody else and so on. Part of the second strategy is how do we trim that so that the petrol price must respect its market value.
One other point, Minister, that you brought up in your speech was the fact that, you know, the economy seems to be getting better. You said that the projections are looking better. But remember, we go back to the windfall again. I've noticed all you did, as far as the grant is concerned, is saying that the COVID-19 distress grant will be extended, right? But you didn't say anything beyond that. Is the economy projected to grow well enough so that we can actually consider that revenue that might come in for a future, more permanent grant? Is it possible?
I don't know whether I've said it in the speech or not. As between now and October, what we will be doing as National Treasury is to do an evaluation of every grant that exists, whether it's extended public works program, community development workers, put all of those together and say this is the amount we're spending on grants. A review. What is the optimal way in which we can utilize these grants? It may well be that the outcome is that you have got to have this thing as a permanent feature. If it does that, then we've got to, it must be a product of this review.
And the reason why that's important is because if people step out of the grant system, the problem, Minister, is that they don't have any jobs to get into. And that's when the broader action plan comes in.
Let me just say, tell you, I've got a relative in Soweto and Snawan.
Yeah.
It's done N6, electrical engineering. N6, but through a TVET. But what he lacks is a practical experience which you do in a factory so that you get a trade certificate. So my argument is a multi-pronged approach which says let's not constrain these young people here. We need, for instance, to employ a different strategy which we work with industry and make sure that these people, there's about more than 700,000 unemployed young people who have got a tertiary education of one or the other. Instead of them keeping them in the unemployment pool and think that we'll pay them 350, we should be thinking about, it may well be we'll spend more than 350 in getting them integrated into the economy.
The question of structural reform, you know, you have these ideas and ambitions that come out of SONA. what we see this afternoon, indeed, with many budget speeches, is the type of flesh you put on it. Some might argue that structural reforms pace is just too slow, Minister. The business wants to put their capital in, but all of these things, whether it's infrastructure and policy, is just happening too slow. Does it frustrate you?
I mean, let me say to you, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
For instance, to agree on removing regulations for embedded generation up to 100 megawatts, it didn't take us more than 3 months. The question is, once we have an identification, we're putting more resources now into Vulindlela of people who are going to be working time, looking at these structural reforms, make sure that we can speed them up.
And you see that one other area that needs sped up, those same businesses would argue.
The other area where the president said, where the president said,
go ahead,
what removing red tape.
Yeah.
In one municipality, it takes 2 years to get a rezoning license. In one, it takes 80 days. Why should they be different? So an investor is quite keen on going on with this work, on getting on investing. Why should I wait 2 years for a rezoning license? So all of those things are in the system that we want to remove.
Minister, there are some people that are watching this afternoon that will tell you, and I know this is not part of your official projections, but I'm just curious as to what you think about this. You have the Zondo Commission, you have corruptees being identified and corruptors being identified. Wouldn't it make a huge difference to your budget if people are held accountable and paid that money back? Because it's a sizable amount of money. What's your take on that?
I've had a meeting with the Minister of Justice.
Yeah.
And the DPP, and said to them, South Africa will be expecting a movement from you as a result of the Zondo Commission. What will it take for you to respond up to speed? Is the matter we're discussing. We're going to jump next week. That week, we're finalizing discussion how to capacitate those institutions in order to respond promptly to this issue. And I've made that point here that we will capacitate those institutions.
Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, thanks very much indeed for sitting down and talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you go, Dan. I mean, the Finance Minister says, look, the economy projected-wise is doing better. It's not just the windfall. There is a sizable difference as we see it now with the economy being projected to do somewhat better. The analysts will tell you it will take a long time, though, to get to growth levels where you see job creation being done at a level that will dent unemployment. That's from Parliament for now, Dan.
Thank you very much, Devin Murugan there, hearing from the Minister there after that busy day, getting a overview of what are the challenges and really a lot of reaction and response to the Minister's budget speech, largely positive. I mean, if you've just joined us, I mean, I've seen reports saying, of course, the country's got a very grim debt backdrop, but this year's budget has offered some good news, particularly on tax income and tax relief, education and health, as well, getting a nice big chunk of the new budget as well. And state-owned enterprises, the Minister, they're repeating that to Devin Murugan a short while ago, like Eskom, being warned of tough love ahead while government is aware of its responsibility towards the likes of an Eskom. It's warning that it's not just going to be money for jam, there's going to be tough love.